So listen, I know you've done loads of interviews, etc. On, there's no way I can talk to the Comrade King without talking about the comrades and this amazing
Sure,
journey
sure.
journey that you've been on. One thing a lot of people miss, and there's so much tradition. To me, it's the oldest, most iconic ultra race in the world. There's so much passion and so much history and so much tradition. I'd love to get a bit of an insight because there's quite a lot of people over here. They've heard of the comrades out there. We've had a few people on the podcast, like Katrina Jennings was one of our own who
Oh
came.
yeah, yeah. Well, she had a great run last year.
Absolutely amazing, like to dip her hand into that, and
Yeah.
so it'd be great to get a bit of an insight, actually, into the race itself and some of the tradition around like race numbers and the actual course
Yeah.
itself.
Um, well, yeah, Robbie. So the, I mean, I think that's the thing that makes one of the things that makes the race so special uh, is the tradition, and there's just so many of them. And I've run most of the big city marathons and races around the world, and they all have a little bit of tradition associated with them. But I think the Comrades is the richest for tradition, and those traditions have sort of built up over the years and might well still be added to. I suspect this year one of the traditions that's going to be added to Comrades is the virtual run.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that won't happen on the same day, but it will be a run that people will want to participate in. And this year we had 43,000 people doing the virtual run. So, but that's obviously it's not a 90-kilometer virtual run. It's everything from 5 kilometers to 90. Wow, I can't even think of where to start. But yeah, starting off, when you enter the race, you are allocated a number. And that number remains yours. No one else can have it for as long as you run the race. And they keep it for you for 2 years. So if you don't run for the next couple of years, they still reserve it for you. And when you one day run your 10th, you keep that number forever. No one else can have it. And they signify that in the race because you wear a green number. And it's a pity if I could get to my cupboard, I'd get out my green number. And and that number is known as a permanent evergreen number. So my number, I mean, when I received it was fairly meaningless, 2403. But if you want to break into my bank account or get into my house or switch my alarm off or find out anything about me, just try 2403. And yeah, that is my number. And then when you run your
There was something unique about
20th,
your number as well, though, wasn't it?
it was a lovely story because it belonged to a guy called Doug Glenn from a suburb called Pinetown, which is one of the places you run through in Comrades, before I ran. And he was superstitious. And 3 years in a row, he tried to run Comrades. I think the one year, a couple of days before, he pushed the lawnmower over his foot and couldn't run because he had stitches in his foot. And eventually he just said to the race organizers, can you take this number back and give me another one? Because I'm never going to be able to run Comrades with this number. And he then went on to run 10 Comrades in another number. And just out of interest, he said he just wanted to follow the progress of the unlucky schmuck who got his number after him. And he said, then eventually he wrote to me and he said, Bruce, it was supposed to be yours. Yeah, so that's just the numbers.
But that's pretty unique, though, isn't it? Like to have somebody seen that as a bad luck number, and out of all the people in the world to receive that number, it was Bruce Fordyce who went on to be the most successful runner of the Comrades.
Yeah, so and yet numbers become very famous. Like 1704 is Alan Robb, one of my great rivals. 666 is Graham Fraser, also one of my rivals. Number one was Clive Crawley, who's recently died. Number two was Wally Hayward. So I know some of the numbers as well, that who they belong to. So that's just the numbers. And then there's the tradition of the fact that the race changes direction every year. So one year it's up from Durban to Pietermaritzburg, and the next year it's down from Pietermaritzburg to Durban. And though the distances are more or less the same, the two races are very different as far as the challenge goes. The up run tends to show what kind of a runner you are, because the challenge is you've got to drag your body weight up all those hills to Pietermaritzburg. The down run shows what kind of a masochist you are, because you've got to be able to take the pounding that you get running down those hills. And and runners have their favorite direction. So that's another one of the traditions.
It's a real draw as well, isn't it? Because quite a few of my friends have gone over, and naturally people select the down run thinking it's going to be a lot simpler. So they normally, and it kills the quads. Like they think, okay, I'm definitely going to run down and get a good, decent, fast time, because it's an 89-kilometer route, so that's a long way down. But what seems to happen when they come home, it just settles in them. They have to. There's no way. It's only half the race, isn't it?
You have to go back. You have to run the other direction, without a doubt. And then of course you get hooked on the fact that another one of the traditions is that there are different medals. So, for instance, I've run quite a few London marathons. I love running London, but that's the medal. But in Comrades, there are different medals for different time slots. So, the first 10 men and women get a gold medal. Thereafter, for men, you get if you break 6 hours but you don't make the top 10, you get a Wally Hayward medal, which is half silver, half gold. The women get an Isabel Roche Kelly medal for, I think it's 7 hours. And then there's a silver for 7.5 hours. There's a Bill Rowan named after the first winner of the race for breaking 9 hours, because Bill Rowan ran exactly 9 hours. So you can boast that you would have won the 1921 Comrades. Then there's a Robert Macharlie medal for Robert Macharlie, who ran in the days when black runners were not allowed to run the Comrades. And so the medal for sub 10 hours is named after him. And finally, the Vic Clapham medal is named after the founder of the race, and that's for 11 to 12 hours. And there's a bronze medal as well. So, I mean, I'm even forgetting it. You need a PhD to understand, in Comrades history, to understand all the medals. But those really act as huge spurs to people. So let's say you've run an up and a down, and then you think, but wow, I was really close to a Bill Rowan. I'd love a Bill Rowan. I think I can do that. So it drags you back. Yeah, and keeps going.
Just goals within the goal, really, I suppose.
And then, I mean, I think the tradition that maybe destroys a lot of people and breaks a lot of people's heart is the final cutoff gun that gets fired at the end of the race. So
it's one of the most cruelest guns in the
It goes off at exactly
5:30.
5:30 p.m. And because it's winter in KwaZulu-Natal, the province where the race is run, it's dark. So that those people who come in around about 5:30 in the afternoon started in the dark, and they're finishing in the dark. They have been out there the whole day. And when that gun goes, if you're one stride away from the finish line, it's thank you very much, well done, come back next year.
Is there a barrier comes across or something? Did I hear
Yeah,
that?
as the gun fires, they drag a barrier across. The first person who doesn't make it is quite famous in the newspapers the next day, but they don't get a medal. And the last person who makes it before the gun gets what we call the Battler's Trophy, because you've been out there the longest of anyone that day.
It's bound to be like winning the race for that person. You're the last one.
I mean, well, nobody leaves. I mean, just nobody leaves. I think it's Carla Molinari. I'd have to check with that. Who's just broken the Land's End to John O'Groats record. I think she was the one who told me she finished 9th in the ladies' race a couple of years ago, and she sat down because she was exhausted in the stands just to watch the race while she was recovering. And 6 hours later, she was still sitting there, because you can't drag yourself away from the drama. And she just said the final cutoff gun is brutal, but very dramatic.
But
thousands of people screaming. Huh?
There's nothing else in the world that you'll watch, especially in sports, with something like that, with a cutoff. Like I was in UTMB this year and watching all the guys coming close to the cutoff.
Yeah.
And it gets more and more emotional the closer you're getting to that cutoff. You can see, the battle that people have gone through, just in their body language and their face. I can imagine looking at that clock with 15 minutes to go, You know, and these
Oh,
people come 14 minutes to go because it's a 12-hour cutoff, and you're urging people to get across that line.
yeah, and the crowd starts screaming. And I have actually fired the final gun once. Don't want to do it again. They invite somebody different to fire it every year. I fired it once a few years ago. It's horrific. You walk out. They give you a practice firing, so you know what you're going to do, and you turn your back. You have to turn your back on the runners coming in, and crouching behind you is a big rugby player who's a blocker, and his job is to block the smart aleck who thinks he's going to rugby tackle the person with the gun, so that somebody, and then they get to what they tell you 1 minute, and the crowd starts going, and they have announcers who build this up. My great friend Arnie Geertz is one of the announcers. He screams and screams and tells the people, "Oh no, somebody's just come onto the track." You've got to do a full 400 meters at the end on the grass. So somebody coming in with a minute to go is not going to make it. But
so you can not make it whilst being on the track.
Yeah. You have to cross the line. No, you can be on. Lots of people are on the track. When the gun goes, there's usually about 20 or 30 people on the track. Some crawling. And then you have to lift the gun up high, and the crowd goes hysterical when they see that. And then when it gets to 10 seconds, there's an official in front of you. He's looking at the clock. And because of the noise, he can only count it down with his fingers like this, and then when he gets to 1, he goes. So I can confess that in my year, I went, "Oh, missed I fire?" I gave it at least another 2 seconds, and then that's it. Bang, that's it.
That is crazy. And
I'm back next year. So that's that tradition. Then
because the starting of it though as well, you know,
the start is, I think, the most emotional start of any race, because it's 90 kilometers, so plus minus, and huge hills, and normally very hot, even though it's winter. But it's, you know, KwaZulu-Natal is subtropical, and they start. Well, everybody gets into their pens, so they're in their different batches. You know, obviously the elite runners in front, and going right back to H batch. So there's A, B, C, D, all the way back to H batch. And then they start the tradition of the music. I might get the order wrong, but it's the national anthem. Then it's a song called Shosholoza, which is a Zulu song that the mine workers sing, which really means keep on going, keep on. It's a when you are tired, keep on going. And they sing that, and everybody sings that. At the end of Shosholoza, it's Chariots of Fire, which is really dramatic. And then when the last bars of Chariots of Fire start fading away, it's Max Trimborn's Cockerel Crow. And Max Trimborn used to announce the start of the Comrades Marathon in the 1930s, 1940s, I think, with a cockerel crow. And he can do it brilliantly. I'm not going to try and emulate it. He did it beautifully, and he would do it for every race. And then he died, sadly, in 1985, but they recorded him before that. And so Max Trimborn's Cockerel Crow goes twice.
Wow.
And when you hear the Cockerel Crow, there's an enormous cheer, and then there's silence, because everybody knows, here we go. And then there is a cannon that goes off, bang, and a rocket goes up in the air some years, so that the people in H-Batch and see that the race has started. And here's another one of the traditions that is so cruel. It is not tape to tape. It is not starting line to finish. It is gun to gun. So when the gun goes, the clock is running, and you aren't. If you're in H-Batch, you aren't. And you aren't running for 15 minutes. So you're 15 minutes down if you're at the back when you cross the line. And that is it. That's just another one of the traditions. When the gun goes, the clock is running, and you aren't. So you have to make up that time. And then along the race, there are certain landmarks that are very famous. I mean, I've run Boston, the Heartbreak Hills. Yeah. They wouldn't get a name in Heartbreak Hill would not get a name in Comrades, but I'm not going to say it's a nothing hill, because when you're running a 42K race and you hit Heartbreak, you're tired when you get there. So Heartbreak certainly hurt me. I hurt going up it. But that's a famous landmark. But Comrades has got, on an up run, it has the first major hill you get is Cowie's Hill. 45th Cutting, which is named after the 45th Regiment of Foot, then Cowie's Hill, then Fields Hill, which is the longest hill on the race, then Bertha's Hill, I'm going to forget the order, then Inchanga, just after halfway is Inchanga, which is Zulu for blade of a knife, which gives you an idea of how steep it is. And then at the end of the race is a very infamous Polly Shorts, which is almost 2 kilometers long, very, very steep, which you hit at about 80 Ks when you hit it.
You must know each of those intimately.
I do, yeah, I do. Well, I've run 30 comrades, and I've run the route quite a few times in training, and I've walked the route in a walking race, and I've cycled the route, and I've driven the route, so I know it well. But also along the way, I'm going to leave out some other. There's a couple of landmarks. One is Arthur's Seat, which is a hollowed out area in a cliff face looking out at the Valley of 1,000 Hills, which is too beautiful. It's these rolling Zulu hills with the homesteads on them, and the Umzinduzi River down below, flowing into the Umgeni River, and it's a beautiful view. And that's where Arthur Newton, who's the first multiple winner of the race, and in fact I think considered the father of ultramarathoning, Arthur Newton, who won 5 comrades, he is supposed to have sat there and looked at the view and smoked his pipe when he was on training runs on the route. And so it's called Arthur's Seat, and when you get there you have to do 2 things. You have to throw a flower at Arthur's Seat, and you have to doff your cap and say, "Good morning, Arthur." And if the legend is that if you don't, you will have an appalling second half, because it's just before halfway on the up run and it's just after halfway on the down run. And so nobody goes past Arthur's Seat without saying "Good morning, Arthur" and raising their hat. I mean, even if you're leading, you better do it, because it's just And then just close to Arthur's Seat is the Wall of Honor, which is a long embankment, which is getting longer and longer and longer and longer. It's almost like a war memorial, except it's a happy memorial, and on it it's got hundreds of shields, and the shields are the names of anybody who's ever run comrades. You pay for your own; it doesn't cost much, and they put it up, and they tell you where to look for your shield. And on it, it would have Robbie ran 2019, whatever, and then one day if you do your 10th, they take it down and they put the same shield up, but in green.
Wow.
So that's also one of the traditions, and it looks incredibly moving. And I always tell novices when they're running their first time, I say, have a look at the Wall of Honor, because you can't put your name on it yet. But the day after you finish your first comrades, you can phone them and order your name to put it on the wall.
I feel like I'm not an ultra runner now, because my name's not on the Wall of Honor.
I can't actually believe that. I can't believe the shame of it. I mean, I would not be able to live with myself if I was
you. Do you run ultras? Yes. Is your name on the Wall of Honor? No, then you're not an ultra runner. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just there's no point in living.
So what the course itself then, the downhill or the uphill, which one do you prefer yourself?
I love the up run. It was my first run. It was my first gold medal for finishing in the top 10, first win. This sounds very arrogant, and I don't mean it to sound like that, but I always felt I never worked out the down run to my true genetic potential. I mean, I'm saying it sounds arrogant because I won 3 downs, but I always felt I was vulnerable going down, and my down run time is 3 minutes faster than my best down run time is 3 minutes faster than my best up.
Wow.
And the up run, there was something about going over the top of Polly Shorts and maybe knowing that the second guy is just starting the bottom of Polly Shorts and knowing I think I've got this. Whereas the down run, I have a look over my shoulder when I was going into the stadium at the finish. Yeah,
so that's the history of the race. Now the history of Bruce and how you sort of...
Well, no, there's one last thing. The race has produced some amazing characters as well. I need to say that, there's...
So name a couple of those guys.
Well, Wally Hayward, without a doubt. So a lot of people always want to say Bruce, you're the king of comrades. Wally Hayward is the king of comrades. He won 5. He never lost when he was a younger man. He won his first in 1930. He won his second in 1950. because he hated it so much. His first run was such a horrible experience. He gave it up for 20 years. Then he came back and won 4 more. Then he gave it up, and then he came back and ran it three weeks shy of his 80th birthday.
Yeah.
So call it 80. He ran 9:45 up, 9 hours
That is
45
just
up.
unbelievable. Like,
And he was the biggest winner on the day. I mean, he didn't win the race. He beautifully proved, by the way, about comrades that you don't, or any race, you don't necessarily have to be number one to be a winner. And Wally Hayward at the age of 80. So I think Wally,
that's unbelievable though. That's right up the field. You know, you're beating
9:45. He's beaten more than half the field. More than half the runners are still behind him.
Almost 8 years of age.
Yeah. And as I said, Arthur Newton, the 5 times winners, Hardy Ballington. You know, I'm leaving somebody out. Jackie Meckler, great runner. And then the ladies, Frith van der Merwe, she ran 5:54 down run in 1989. And then this last comrades, Gerda Steyn, 5:58 up.
Yeah.
When I started running comrades, as a male, if you could break 6 hours for the up run, you knew you would win for the up run. If you had told me in 1977 when I ran my first comrades, one day a lady will come along and run 5:58. Well, in fact, when she won, I was with a guy called Derek Price. I was standing with him in the winners get invited to the ex-winners get invited to the old timer. We get invited to the VIP area, and I was standing with Derek Price, who won in 75, and he won with 5:58. And he said to me, Bruce, if you told me in 1975 that I would have been shoulder to shoulder with a woman coming down the last kilometer, I'd have said to you, not a chance. And he said, I'm looking at Gerda and she's blowing kisses to the crowd and she's hugging her family. He said, when I finished, I was a basket case. He said, they took me off and they put me on a drip in the hospital tent. So he says, I know what would have happened if Gerda and I had sprinted the last K. He said, and I wouldn't have won it.
So yeah,
she's awesome. Yeah.
We're seeing that over and over again though with female ultra runners now.
Yeah,
it's unique though, like, isn't it? Because it's really a race of strength when you're running that distance and how your body can sort of hold out, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not, I mean, you know, by the standards of Eliud Kipchoge or whatever, it's not that quick, but it becomes very difficult after 65 Ks. I always say 65, both up and down, is kind of where you find out what you're made of. And by the way, as I was saying that, another tradition that is really odd that struck me about comrades, the kilometers are measured in reverse order. So for instance, you run London Marathon. Yes, it's measured in miles, but you run for a while and you go under something that says a balloons that say 1. So great, you've done 1 mile, 25 to go. But in comrades, you run for a bit, and if you're lucky in the dark, you'll see one that says 89 to go. And later on, hours and hours and hours later, you'll see one that says 63 to go. What does that mean? It just means it's far. You know? So you need to know the comrades route, and you run comrades on landmarks, and you get the landmarks behind you. So I always take a tour every year of interested runners in a bus and take them through the route. And most of them report back to me later in emails and things to say that was so valuable. I knew where I was, I knew what was coming. And you start doing a countdown once it's a realistic distance. So if you're running the down run at the top of Fields Hill, you're about to go down into Pinetown, you pass a board that says 21 to go. So you know you've got a half marathon to go. And for the first time, you can see the sea. You can see the Indian Ocean in the distance. So there's a kind of feeling, I can do this. This has now become a distance I can relate to. So the distance markers, that's another insane thing.
You mentioned bus there. There are actually people on the course, aren't there, that sort of pacers that are trying to get people in around that 12-hour cutoff.
Yeah, we call them buses. So that we in South Africa, I'm not sure if it's the same terminology overseas, but a bus is a group of like-minded people wanting to run the same time. And there's a bus driver who's the person who's the expert at getting it, and quite often a kind of a conductor at the back who's snapping at the heels of the people who are falling off. And they'll have a sign up that says sub 11, sub 10 or whatever it is. And people who want to run get in that bus. Personally, I hate buses because I don't like sing-alongs, and they all have sing-along things, you know, when you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, you know. I'm not big on that. And there's one guy who's brilliant at taking people through, but he's got a tambourine that he taps. He bangs all the way through the race for 11 hours. Ching, ching, ching. It would drive me at the wall. And also the problem with buses is you quite often can't get into the tables to get your drinks. And that, again, is another tradition that I forgot. I've never in any race in the world seen watering stroke seconding tables better than the ones that are at Comrades. They come up every 3 kilometers or so, and they have everything you could ever think of wanting. Everything from, fizzy drinks to coffee to tea to Vaseline because you're chafing to chocolate, bananas, anything. And then on Comrades Day, you can also ask anybody in the crowd for anything, and they will get it for you. So one of my friends got a gold medal a few gold medals in the 1970s, Trevor Parry. He's known as Eat Soup because he had a craving for onion soup on his way up Polly Shorts, and somebody in the crowd ran into their house, got a packet of onion soup and brought it out, and it was actually the salt he wanted, and he put it all. So when he's photographed him finishing, he's got this white powder all over his face. So that's the enthusiasm of the crowd. The following day, if you had to try and ask somebody for something like that, they'd tell you in rude words what to do with yourself. But on Comrades Day, everybody's trying to help you finish.
Why do you think it means so much to the people there that aren't doing the race?
Well, you see, Comrades is an institution now. I mean, it's unique in that we get sort of 13 hours of live television coverage. Because the television coverage starts about an hour before the gun goes, and they paint the scene, and they have various people, sometimes like me, who chat about who do you think is going to do it today and whatever, and then it goes on until the prize giving afterwards. It's incredible because most of that TV coverage is of hundreds and hundreds of people walking. Can you imagine having to commentate on that? Oh, there's my friend from Cape Town. I know the one in the striped vest. And then another tradition in South Africa is that we have a very tight club system. So we all belong to clubs, and the club colors will stand out. So you can say that's a Hillcrest Villager, that's a Celtic Harrier, that's a Rand Athletic Club, that's Joburg Harriers, that's whatever, the something Mumbers, or whatever the name of the club is. And so that's quite a tight tradition. And so Comrades has just become, on that day, I'm trying to think of what the equivalent would be like watching the Wimbledon final.
Okay.
Nobody doesn't watch, or the FA Cup final. Everybody in South Africa was glued to their televisions for the Rugby World Cup final. Notice I've only mentioned that once. Did I mention we won?
It's early days,
two tries. Anyway, but the nation comes to a standstill for Comrades because virtually everybody watching has either run it or is planning to run it or has a loved one who's running it. Or in fact, we get little old grannies who are not interested in sport, and they tell me, we sit there, we make tea in the morning, and we sit there and we watch every minute. And of course, it's fabulous watching the winners coming in, but then it builds in drama. Because those cutoff guns, by the way, there's not just the cutoff gun for the final. There's a cutoff gun for each of the medals.
Yeah.
But they build up, the cutoff guns build up in intensity, because it finally is getting to the last, the other cutoff guns are, okay, you didn't get a silver medal, but you still got a Bill Rowe and you still got a medal. But the final cutoff gun is you got nothing, not even a badge.
It just encompasses the human spirit, though, doesn't it? It's just like watching, when you say the FA Cup final or Wimbledon final, it's exactly the same, They put all that effort in to get to where they are, to that point. And there's winners and losers in that. And everybody's really a winner.
One difference is those are obviously elite sportsmen and women, they are the elite. Whereas this race is full of very ordinary human beings, some of them who are, I chose my parents correctly. There's a lot of people there who are genetically not suited, and yet they're getting themselves through it. So that's probably the drama of the race as well.
Because everybody's fighting their
Yeah,
own battle, aren't they? It doesn't matter what position you're in. You're fighting your own battle.
But everybody's hoping for you and willing you on, and in the front of the race it's pretty intense and it's a lot of hard racing. But everywhere else, the common enemy is the clock. So everyone's trying to beat the stopwatch across the line.
I'm assuming it's a very. I'm assuming it's a very supportive race then, where everybody's egging each other on. Come on, we can do this. We can.
Yeah. I mean, on the course itself, on the day, they say there's 500,000 spectators. So there are very few quiet places in Comrades. There are a few quiet spots, but most of it is packed. And South Africans are doing what they love doing most when there's sport, and that's what's called a braaivleis. Now, braai is a barbecue. But a braai is a braai. A barbecue is a really watered down word for, this is a braai where everyone's got boerewors sausages and chops, and there's a lot of... It has
to be tempting, like halfway through that race, just pull over, like, and just join the braai, like.
Well, I know. So I mean, you can stop and somebody will give you whatever you want. You know, they'll also push you down the route and say, okay, that's enough. You can have a bite, but now go. You've got to go. So there's thousands of spectators, and then there's thousands watching at millions watching at home. So it's a huge day in South Africa's calendar.
It's phenomenal, and there's more and more people becoming aware of it right across, likes of podcasts and things like that. I think I've had 3 sort of local people on the podcast that have done the Comrades, and to them, it is everything. You know, they come back with high expectations, but they come back with a lot more than what they thought they would have. And I have a guy that works with me, Lane McGlue, you call him, and because we were starting running marathons, he actually has completed 10 Comrades.
Oh wow! Okay.
He used to run around 740s, and he had his own little traditions of drinking a wee shot of whiskey, you know, the night before the race and things like this. Real old school, really old school, like done it in the early 70s, sort of 80s. I'm sure he's fully aware of who Bruce Fordyce is as well, because it was around that time. But every time I meet that guy, like, he has to tell me about all his little stories of what happened in the Comrades.
I'm sure. I mean, we've all got a lot, and there's a story to go with every single one you run. You know, so yeah, I mean, it's you live a lifetime in that day. It's both the shortest and the longest day of your life, and it's hard to explain, but you live a full lifetime, and you go through the full gamut of human emotion, from despair to joy to crying to laughter to everything. You know, it's an incredible thing. I always say to people, out on the road at 65 kilometers, around about 65, 70 kilometers, you are going to meet somebody that you deeply admire and hugely respect, and that person is yourself, because you are the only person who can get you through the last bit. I mean, people will pat you on the, people will help you and they'll advise you, and you're surrounded by a lot of runners if you're further back, but you're on your own, and you've got to get yourself through. People who finish Comrades are not the same people the next day. You're a different person the next day.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity, though, to grow, though, isn't it? As a person, as an individual, when you put yourself into that position and you think that you're never going to get through it, and you find a way, something different.
You find a way more than once during the race. So you have good patches and bad patches, and the bad patches start to build up a bit, but you find a way.
Have you any techniques?
Amazing race.
Have you any techniques to get through those sort of low patches?
So there were 2 different things. See, I've run 30 Comrades, and I've run a lot competitively. So when it's competitive, it's so intense. The only thing that I can think that's the equivalent is writing a very hard, very difficult exam at university or something like that, where you are absolutely gone afterwards because you've drained everything out of yourself to pass that exam. And so that's very intense concentration, and it goes quickly. But at the back, it's really getting the landmarks behind you, talking a lot. I talk nonstop because I've been at the back, by the way. I mean, I've run right the way through the field. You talk a lot, you joke a lot, You don't focus on the distance markers. Don't even look at them. And yeah, just get the landmarks behind you and have a sort of a triumph every time you get one of the major hills behind you. Okay, great. You've just done Inchanga. Okay, don't think what's coming.
Just stay very
and I think it's the silence. The silence at Comrades is bad. I play off the energy of the spectators, so I'll blow kisses and wave and chat to people, and
Just very, very important, I suppose, just to keep moving forward and keep reminding yourself as long as you're moving forward.
And that's one of the things I advise beginners, particularly, especially if you're in one of the back batches at the start, F, G, or H. I say to them, what you have to do is once that gun goes and you cross the finish line, and remember you will lose time, you have to make a promise to yourself that everything you do that day will be a step in the direction of the finish. You can walk slowly. You can talk to a friend who you've met at the side of the road, but you have to tell them to come with you while you're talking. And when you get to one of the fantastic seconding tables, you go through it walking and you grab whatever you need to drink or eat. But what you do is you will never, ever stop moving to the finish. Because once you stop and you have a rub because you're cramping, and they've got wonderful masseurs on the way who can rub your legs, and you get so tempted because you just want somebody to love you because you're hurting so much. You're going nowhere while you're having your legs rubbed, but the clock is still running. And then those are the people who don't make it.
So it's sounding very unique that it's a total race against the clock and not the distance, isn't it? It's coming out more and more.
No, well, it's the distance and the course too, because it's brutal.
Yeah.
It's
great to hear you say that after 30 attempts.
No, it's horrible. I'm not going to lie to you. The hills are horrible.
No point mollycoating it.
No, Fields Hill on an uprun goes on for 4 kilometers, and not 4 gentle, wussy little kilometers. 4 Ks. Relentless. Botha's Hill, I don't know, I think Botha's is about 2. Polly Shorts is even steeper, and that's almost 2. But I know what I mean. I don't want to make you think that's the uprun. Downrun in Changa, climbing out of Drummond, which is halfway. In Changa has some breaks in it, and it flattens out from time to time. But actually, you climb for 10 Ks. You just continually, and then then it goes up again. And downrun, Cowie's Hill on the downrun. Whoa! When you hit Cowie's Hill, and you told all your friends you're running the Comrades, but there's a television camera on Cowie's Hill, and all your friends can clearly see that you're walking Comrades. And in fact, my last Comrades was very memorable because I ran with Zola Budd.
Wow.
I caught Zola. She was running her first. I caught her with about 25 to go. And I went straight past her because I thought, I'm a cheeky little imp running her first Comrades. What does she think she's doing going ahead of me? So I caught her, and then I thought, no, this is the missed marketing opportunity of a lifetime. So I stopped and I waited for her to catch me, because you never go back. Every step that you've earned, you're not going to go back and unearn that step. And so I waited, and then I said, come Zola, I'll take you through it. We were a unique combination because I couldn't do the downhills. I was hurting so much, but she was really useless on the uphills. So between the two of us, we kind of talked our way through to the end. And all I can say is, I can't say it because it's a live broadcast, but she's a fantastic person to run with. She's not at all irritating, but she swore in Afrikaans a lot. Yeah. She swore in Afrikaans a lot. Yeah.
You must have a lot of unique stories like that with people that you've sort of run through over the years, especially in the later years.
Well,
it must be an amazing bubble or buzz that you're in, because you're Bruce Fordyce, like you're woven into the fabric of the Comrades.
That to me is wonderful. I can't believe that I'm part of the history of the race. But in a sense, everybody is. You write your own chapter. It might be or your own paragraph might only be a small one, but you're part of it. But yeah, there've been some unique people. A lot of people don't know that Gordon Ramsay has run 3 Comrades.
Yeah.
From Hell's Kitchens.
Yeah.
He's actually done 5. He's actually started 5 and dropped out of 2. And
That's
Gordon
class.
Ramsay, I saw him on the start line of the London Marathon. He was standing there and he was telling everyone, he said, Bruce, tell them, this is just a flat little jog through London. Tell them, all the other people.
He's done the Ironman a few times as well in Hawaii.
Yeah, he's a tough character. There've been some
I bet he
Olympic
was
medalists.
swearing going up the hills.
Yeah, I'm sure the language. I'm sure the language was choice. And there've been some Olympic medalists and quite well-known people, famous people. A lot of the ex-sportsmen and women in South Africa run it. That's just it draws people to it. It's sitting. I mean, I can see it sitting in your mind. Just a question of when. It's not should I, shouldn't I, it's just when.
Because there's a huge number now, isn't there? It must be near 20,000 people running the race.
And next year will be 27,000.
Wow.
Because it's a centenary next year. I don't know what's happening with this COVID thing, but I'm sure by next year we'll run. 27,000 is because it's 100 years since the first Comrade.
That's unbelievable. How many people run it roughly when you run your first?
So my first one was 1977, and there were 1,600. Wow. So 1,600.
That's still a big number then, back then. Crazy people.
Yeah.
Because they were really crazy people back then. You know, that was a crazy group of people.
South Africans are odd. It's just tough. So all our challenges are big and quite tough. There's a wonderful canoe race that follows the Comrades route, but down in the valley below, in those two rivers I mentioned earlier, the Doozy River and the Umgeni River. It's a 3-day race. You paddle from Pietermaritzburg all the way to the sea in Durban over 3 days. And I've done 10 of those. And there are massive rapids that you've got to go through, and you fall out. And at times, it's go there as you please almost race. So there are times when the river does a big lazy bend. So it's quicker to get out and run over the hill and put your boat in on the other side. So at times, I've got a classic photograph of myself running. I'm carrying a boat on my shoulder, but I was in a double with a mate. So he's carrying the front, I'm carrying the back. We've got our paddles, we've got life jackets on, and we're running through a little village where the dogs are barking at us, and there's an old man with a pipe sitting smoking next to his hut, clapping us on, and the nearest water is 5 kilometers away, but we're in a canoe race. So that's the doozy. It's also a great challenge.
What year did the Comrades start?
1921.
1921. So you
so next year
so that's right.
So next year's the centenary.
Yeah, sorry.
Not the 100th running though, because we missed COVID this year and we missed a few years in the Second World War. So there will be 2 celebrations. You see, one now and another one in 6 years' time for the 100th running.
So you've missed the opportunity next year. Make sure you jump in 6 years' time. That's what I'm hearing. Or just do every one up until then.
Yeah, I can't, I've run 30. And finishing Rizola, my 30th, we did a shade over 8 hours. And when we came into the stadium, it's Kingsmead Cricket Stadium, on a down run, the place erupted. And to finish Rizola, she's an icon in South Africa, it was as moving as winning. I can say that. So I almost don't want to do another one because it was a wonderful way to say goodbye to the race from a running point of view. I've also got a lot slower and I have a bit of a gammy knee. And then to be quite honest with you, it's a massive ego trip to be a past winner and then not run, because you can do all the cocktail parties, you can do all the functions, you can stay late, you can sign autographs, you can pose. But if you're running, you've got to wrap yourself in cotton wool, get away from people in case somebody gives you flu. You get really nervous when you're running.
Because you are a bit of a party animal too, aren't you? So you can enjoy that.
No, my very expensive legal team denies that I'm a party animal. No, I love nothing better than getting on. A lot of runners are very introverted. I'm the opposite. So yeah, if we all past winners have to give a speech or something or say something, all the others will just point, Bruce, you're doing it. But yeah, so it's wonderful to do that at Comrades. The only time I missed the race in recent years, so my last one was 2012. In recent years, the only time I've missed actually running is the day afterwards. Because let me tell you what, the day afterwards, the runners are all limping. They limp with very stiff, painful legs. Some of them are losing toenails. And if it's a down run, it's a really bad limp. But it's a limp of pride. It is such a limp of pride. And it doesn't matter what time you might have won the race. You might have just beaten the final cutoff gun. But that limp, it's like you're all brothers and sisters in arms, and you've got wounds. And nobody really kind of says, what time did you run? They'll just say to you, wow, Polly Shorts was hard this year. Yeah, it was terrible. And you see them all over Durban limping, and then people who drive home particularly driving home to Johannesburg, you get out on the way at one of the garages where they've got a coffee shop or something, and you see these people, they can't get out the car without somebody helping them. And it's just it's a limp of honor. And I always feel slightly ashamed that I'm not limping.
You know, put a fake limp on or something every now and then.
Well, they'll know I didn't run. They say, no, Bruce, we know you. We saw you in the winners section at the finish, drinking red wine with some of your mates. You didn't run.
There's a huge buzz about the race, obviously. If it was 1977, you'd done your first race, and it started in 1921. Like, did you have that same exposure, like, as you were growing up around the Comrades? Was it always something you wanted to do as a child?
I kind of knew that I wanted to. So when I ran at school, I ran well. You know, the longer the distance, I ran well. But running well at school isn't an indication that you might win a race like the Comrades one day. But it was part of our lives even then, except we had no television in South Africa. South Africa only got television in 1976 because the nationalist government didn't want us to see television where we would see things like black and white people getting on well together, you know, and the propaganda, but eventually they had to crumble to the pressure. So we used to listen to the race on the radio, and we did then. So I knew, actually Dave Bagshaw was a 3-time winner. He lives in Sheffield. Dave Bagshaw was my hero when I was at school. He won 3 in a row. And then what happened was from 1980 onwards, they started televising it. But they up until then, they used to film it and then show a 1-hour version of the race. And then in 1980, they filmed the last bit live. And it coincided exactly with my era that they went live the whole way.
Brilliant. And
so from that point on, it just exploded, both the viewership and the numbers of people wanting to run. And so it was very fortunate for me, because South Africa was in sporting isolation because of apartheid, that we had very little to look at externally, so our whole country looked internally, and Comrades is one of the biggest things to watch, and so that really helped me a lot.
So everybody knows you walking down the street?
No, not now. No.
But back in the 80s,
you know, maybe in the 1980s, no, but you got to remember back then I had long flowing blonde hair. I was beautiful. I was absolutely gorgeous. But then there were some other characters who helped to build the race, you know, like Frith van der Merwe, who won 3 and ran that incredible time. Wally Hayward, Alan Robb, who won 4. The two of us clashed, but we're great mates. But you know, so those characters helped to build the race as well. Hosea Charlie, who was really the first prominent black runner of the race. Sam Shabalala was the first black winner of the race. Though all those characters helped to build it. And the live television coverage, without a doubt, that was huge.
It's just like one big live storybook, isn't it? It's getting added to all the time.
Yeah. Every year has wonderful things that happen and sad things that happen. But most of it's filled with, you know, just incredible courage. And here's an example. Long before apartheid had finally left South Africa, black, white, women, children, Muslim, Christian, atheists, whatever, all running together. Common goal, get to the finish before the final gun. And it was already telling South Africa, this is what we could be, and this is how fabulous we can be. as a nation when we all strive together for the common goal.
Awesome. Like 1977, I keep on saying that number, but when you entered your first race, like you done phenomenally well. Were you surprised? Was it 43rd, around that sort of position?
Yeah, so funny enough, if I can put a quick ad in here, I'm busy finishing a book, which I think I'm going to call Winged Messenger. And it's Winged Messenger because Hermes is the logo of Comrades. Hermes is the logo on your medal, the Winged Messenger. And it's a book advising novices what to do using my own training diary from back then as a guide with comments. This was a great idea. This was not a great idea.
So you recorded everything you did?
From day one. In fact, astonishingly, I happen to have it on my desk, so you can see how battered it is. Here you are. The races are in red.
Read one line out of it there, or a comment out of it. Or even in the red or anything.
Ran 10 Ks out towards Woodmead. My right shin is very sore. Then I ran 5 Ks back home. Shin improved. Here's a good one. Club 45 miler. So our club used to run a 45 miler. At about 29 miles, I'd had enough, but kept going. Finished very strongly at the end. Oh dear, Comrades is another 10 more miles.
Oh, no way. That's
in those days, I was also fully bilingual in the sense that the textbooks were all in miles because they were English and American. But South Africa uses kilometers, so that's why my diary.
You could almost just put a cover on that book and publish it as it is.
No, so that's what I've done. I've taken this and I've put comments alongside. So here I've got May the 2nd. I can tell you this, I'll let you know. It says, no run. Why was there no run on May the 2nd? I'll tell you why. Because the night before at my university, there was a Monty Python festival where they gave out free wine. and
AKA party animal.
And in those days, The Life of Brian, the movie, was banned in South Africa because it was irreligious, and South Africa was a christelijke onderwys Christian country. You could not see Life of Brian, but we saw it at our university with free wine. So there was going to be no.
That must have been an epic night. That must have been an epic night.
No, it was an epic night. So I've got all that in my book. So it's coming out in end of September. I want it out for next year for the novices.
Okay, that'll be epic.
So I'm going back to your original question. Yeah, I mean, almost immediately I was quite good, but I ran 6:45 the first year, so that's a really solid silver. But it was still, I was running down, it was an up run, I was running down into a hill called Ashburton. It's actually, the real name's Impushini in Zulu, but I was running down to Impushini Hill, which is a hill before Polly Shorts with about 10 or 12 kilometers to go. No, about 12 kilometers to go. And there was a lady standing there with a radio. And her radio was blaring, and I heard the commentator saying, and here comes Alan Robb into the stadium. It's going to be a new record, and my goodness, doesn't he look fresh and strong. And I remember I told Alan afterwards, I hated you, because I knew I had another hour out there still. And I knew Alan's sitting on the grass. He's got a cold beer in his hand, because that's who Alan is. And he's won. And I'm still out here for at least another, and a whole of Polly Short still. Yeah,
that's class. So you went on then. You sort of your next race, your next comrade. Sorry, you only improved on that.
My next race.
Just talk me through that little journey you went through. Then your race and how that pulled you into winning your first race. Then.
Yeah. So my first year, as you could hear from the Monty Python Festival, was on the list of priorities, but low down below partying and women. Chasing girls unsuccessfully, then trying to pass my degree, and then probably third place, Comrades. But then the following year, I did a bit more training and I came 14th. That was a down run. But what was significant for that year was I actually got into 10th. And on Cowie's Hill, I was lying 10th, but I was finished. I didn't have a lot of strength left, and I slipped back to 14th. But I had a glimpse of the top 10 run. Oh, well, okay, not Alan Robb. You needed to know that the 1978 down run, Alan Robb was on another planet. He won by 20 minutes.
Wow.
And he became the first man in the history of the race to break 5.5 hours. So he was finished, showered, and having lunch, and we were still out there running. I had got up to, I saw eighth and ninth ahead of me, and I realized they're human. They're just like you are. They're tired. They're not gods. And so then 1979, I said, okay, what can happen if I really start to work hard now? So I started training harder. My times at various distances started coming down. And
do you think that's important to get the times down on the lower or the smaller races?
Yeah. I'd tell everybody, why do you need to run an ultra to find out that you're ready to run an ultra? Go and run a 10K, and you run with about 3 weeks to go to the big race, and you run a PB at your 10K. That's all you know, everything you need to know. It's given that you've done some of the long runs and you've done the basic strength training. And so, yeah. And then
showing you how good a condition your body's in, isn't it? That's the
well. So when I was winning, I mean, this is not going to frighten any of the Kenyans or anything, but when I was winning comrades, I like to run it. I like to break 30 minutes for 10Ks with about 3 weeks to go. If I could do a 29 something, that would tell me everything I needed to. Or the 1 year I did a 14:20 5K. Then I knew I was ready to.
Do you think that's your method of training though, to be able to have such a great range? Because that's pretty good, like to be running sub 30 anyway, but to actually extend that. Do you think that's just unique to you as an individual, or do you think it's your training?
No, I think it's important. I think it's important to be reasonably quick at the shorter stuff. But anyway, so it's, in fact, to give you the opposite example, in 1979 I was third, and I would have sold my soul for 10th. You know, so to finish on the podium was unbelievable. But the runner who won that race, Pete Forster, and he would not be insulted if I said this, is by a lot of standards quite slow at the shorter stuff. He just had tremendous strength, and he got in front, and he broke the record that day, took a minute or so off it, and he beat us all. So Pete was not a great example of a particularly fast. He was probably, and I'm using the past tense because sadly Pete died a couple of years ago, and we miss him terribly, but he was probably about a 32-minute 10K. But on that particular day in 1979, he got his head down, he ran the same pace the whole way, and he got away from all of us. Yeah.
It still sounds fast to me though.
Okay, yeah.
It's all in context.
Well, it's very fast for me now.
Yeah.
I'm happy if I break an hour.
So podium must have been an amazing experience to get your first podium place, like in the Comrades.
It's still my happiest run. Absolutely my happiest run, because nobody except my training mates knew that I had a chance. And as I said, I would have sold my soul for 10th, and I finished third. And my girlfriend who was watching described my last lap around the field. She said, "You were just a giant smile on legs," because I couldn't believe it. And also nobody knew me. And my number was a bit crumpled. When I got to the top of Polly Shorts, I was lying third, but I was going fast. And the officials in those days, they used those CB radios to tell people who the next runner is going to be. And I was at a university called Wits University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, wearing my university colors. And so one of the officials jumped in the road and said, "Witsy, you're going to finish third, but we don't know who you are. Can you tell us who you are?" Yeah, so that was
hilarious.
But you see, but then after that, once you've made top 3, you're a marked man, you know. And it was the happiest run ever. We went down a bunch of students. We had a lot of fun. We woke up on the morning. We all did well. All my friends, we all did well in different ways. We had a hell of a party 2 nights afterwards. We raced each other on the beach in Durban into the sea, which was hysterical because we had such stiff legs. And then one of the guys couldn't get out because he cramped in the water. And so we started shouting, "Shark, shark." And it was just, and it was kind of like the innocence. After that, the innocence was gone, because then I was a marked man, and suddenly the newspapers are phoning you the next year. "How are you looking, Bruce? You know, what do you think?" And so the following year, 1980, another down run, I didn't want to do worse than I'd done the year before. I was so happy with third. I won my University Sportsman of the Year. You know, you get a whole lot of things that go with it. But no money. There was no money in my time. So I didn't want to do worse. And so I started off I was a bit too cautious, a bit too timid. And so I got exactly what I wanted, which is what I didn't want. I finished second. So I improved on the year before, but I didn't win. And Alan won that one again.
Was he far ahead in that race?
No. 2 minutes. I tell him, Alan, I could see you down the road. I couldn't really. But I beat it the year before. I'd beaten Alan because he had a bad run the year before, came fifth. But on the down run, Alan was absolutely phenomenal. So he never lost a down run. To a certain point, he never lost the down run.
But anything can happen right to the end, can't it? That you can cramp up on that race at any point. Like so much fatigue in your legs.
Yeah, you can cramp, you can fall over, you can collapse. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of things. But I didn't catch Alan, and I can tell you from personal experience that second sucks. Second is a horrible. Third is wonderful. Over the years, I've studied the podium. You know, at any major track and field meet or marathon, the winner is obviously happy, but quite often fairly sober looking because they're thinking, I did it, but now what? The third place finisher is partying generally because they didn't even think they'd get a medal. You know, they didn't think they'd land on the podium. And so they're over them. In fact, quite often you see the 1500 meter race, they've still got 5 steps to take. They haven't crossed the line, but their arms are already up in the air celebrating. But the second place finisher is really irritated because it's like, what could have been?
Yeah. I get that. And there's nobody apart from people that have been on the podium would have been able to observe that.
Yeah, I've seen it. And just from a couple of Olympics ago, we got a divine lady paddler. I'm a member of a paddling club as well because I do this. Bridget Hartley. I think it was the 1,000 meter kayak or something. She got the bronze. I still can sometimes look at a YouTube of her on the podium. She's jumping up and down. She doesn't know what to do with herself, where to put her beer. She's so happy, you know, because I don't think Bridget thought she'd get a medal and she got bronze, you know, in the Olympics. I mean, that's not bad, yeah.
Winner. So your first win then, did it come the year after coming second? Did that really fire you up?
Yeah, it did. And then I got a lot more serious and I broke 2:20 for a marathon. So I ran a 2:18 marathon in the build-up. So that was, for me, was a good sign. It still wasn't as fast as some of the guys, but I knew with my strength, I now had a reasonable amount of speed. I had my strength and I had experience, and it was an up run, and I love the up run. So I kind of said, now I'm not going to be too cautious at the start. I'm still going to be cautious because 90 kilometers, but I'm going to put myself in a position where I'm a contender all the way.
And how do you attack that then? I'm sure you don't go off the front. There's no such thing as a 90K race.
I still didn't go.
It's a 90K race.
Yeah, I put Alan Robb in front of me with his red Liverpool socks. He's a Liverpool supporter. I had to say congratulations to him after all these years. They finally did it.
So who do you support?
Man U.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, well, just so you know, I'm not a Johnny come lately. I supported them from 1968. Okay. When I was at school at Canterbury in Kent, because my father was a soldier in the British Army, and we were allowed to stay up late and watch what was then the European Cup, when Manchester United beat Benfica 4-1. And I became a fan then. And I was particularly proud of the fact that a Mozambican goat herd called Eusebio scored the goal for Benfica. But my African roots were proud of him. At least he scored. Anyway, going back.
But that doesn't help, though, that Alan's a Liverpool supporter. That's bound to fire you up a little bit more. Him and his Liverpool socks ahead of you.
I'm always going to get fired up with Alan. No, we're the complete opposite. I'm very, very fond of him. Don't play this interview to him because he'll think I'm getting soft. But he's the direct opposite of me. Liverpool, Manchester United. Loves the down run. I love the up run. Red Sox with a terrible shuffle running style. It's horrific, but very good for the down. I had a beautiful, flowing, wonderful stride. He's introverted. I'm extroverted. But he's got a dry sense of humor. Every now and again, he pops up a little thing. Yeah. So then in 1981 I won, but it was a very unhappy win for me because I wore a black armband in the race, protesting against the fact that the race had associated itself with the nationalist apartheid government. So 1981 was the 20th anniversary of the apartheid regime, and the nationalist government had a whole lot of celebrations to celebrate. They had, jet planes flying over and tank parades and lots of politicians giving speeches and wagging their fingers and whatever. But those of us, and then they had a few sporting events to go with it. And in my opinion, Comrades sold its soul to be one of those events, particularly given that black runners had only been allowed to run the race since 1975. And so quite a few runners withdrew, but those of us who wanted to run said, we'll show our displeasure, we'll wear black armbands. And that was, I had eggs thrown at me, I had tomatoes thrown at me. I was the most unpopular winner of the race, I think in the history of the race, and people were booing me on the route. So it was a very unhappy race for me, though I won. And it shows how naive I was, that it only occurred to me afterwards that if you wear a black armband and you're one of the favorites for Comrades, there's only one position you can finish. And that's first, because otherwise everyone's going to say, yay, good, the commie didn't win. I wasn't the only runner with a black armband. I was just the prominent one because I won.
Yeah, and that was televised as well. So I'm sure they weren't.
Yeah, no, they told the TV camera to film me from the angle where my armband wasn't showing. So then I moved it around. I just swapped arms.
Did anything happen to the podium then? Or were you wearing your armband for that?
No, there was a stony silence,
Just a strange time.
Yeah, I was. Sorry?
It was a strange time.
Very strange time. I mean, we were celebrating 20 years of apartheid, but there was no cause to celebrate. We couldn't go to the Olympics. We couldn't play. We played rugby. Our Springboks played rugby against the All Blacks. And in New Zealand, and there were demonstrators in New Zealand. There was people who were, sometimes the Springboks had to sleep in school halls and things like that. Or in the one test match, somebody flew overhead dropping flower bombs on the game. And and we're celebrating this, where we've divided another country into two opposing factions. Those, one of the great rivalries in sport is always the Springboks facing the Haka. It's blood-tingling stuff. And here we've got people who desperately wanted to see that and others who desperately didn't want it to allow it to happen while South Africa was in the situation that it was in. So, yeah, there was just no cause to celebrate. But then, luckily and happily, I continued to win after that. And one of the things I've learned is the whole world loves a winner. And I've always looked at it. I particularly like looking at something like Wimbledon, where the darling of the court becomes the darling of center court, and they don't like the new imposter at first, but then he or she wins, and then they become the darling of the court. So Alan was the darling of Durban and Pietermaritzburg, and then this communist Wits guy wins. That's a nightmare for them. But then after a couple of years, actually the commie Wits guy is quite a cute guy, and he's a nice guy, and he's running really well. So then I became the new, and my mate Nick Bester, who I'm very friendly with, who finally beat me in 1991. They hated him. Because he was an Afrikaans guy from Pretoria, goes and beats our darling Bruce. What is he doing? You can't do that,
Because you won, for those that don't know, you won 8 years in a row then. You went on a real winning spree.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Which do you think was your best win out of those?
The answer to that is ask a mother who her favorite child is, a mother who has lots of children. There's the naughty one, the good one, the brilliant one, the bad one, the ugly one, the pretty one. Each of them are close to my heart, but if you had to say 1983, I won by 15 minutes and I was very strong. I was over Polly Shorts and going to the finish. If somebody had said to me, Bruce, it's 5 more kilometers, sorry, we got 5 more Ks, we didn't measure it properly, I would have said, okay, let's do it.
So that must have been pretty epic because you must have known like maybe 15, 20, 10K to go. This is done then.
Well, as you said earlier, you never really know till you hit the line because, a lot of things can go wrong. But I had gone over the top of Polly Shorts, and on the up run, it's kind of rolling. There are a few bumps, but it's rolling to the finish. And if you're 15 minutes in the lead, the other guy hasn't even started Polly Shorts, the person lying second, so you're gone. And I was running very fast at the end. And then I think 1988, Alan Robb was the first person to break 5.5 hours going down. I was the first person to break 5.5 hours going up. In 1988, I did that. So, and it was also strong. I was about 12 minutes ahead at the end.
So what pace would that have been?
I ran 5:27.
What pace would that have been? 5:27 over 90K.
I've never sat down and worked it out because I'm not very good at the maths, but it's about 3 minutes 35 to 3 minutes 40 seconds a kilometer, that kind of pace. I don't know what that is in miles, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit quicker than my 5K PB. That's what it sounds like.
Well, a lot. My last 5Ks of Comrades is quicker than I can run now. 5.
But uniquely though, you did have 2 year times were exactly the same. But
I think I stand open to correction, but I think I'm the only runner in the entire history of the race to have 2 identical times, and both of them are wins. So in 1985, and both in the same direction. 1985 up run 5:37.01. 1987 up run 5:37.01. You can't stage manage that because you could look at your own watch, but it has no bearing to the official watch that's going. Yeah.
That was pretty phenomenal. So just a fluke, really, I suppose. Coincidence.
It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate, yeah.
You did win it one more time, so 9 years altogether.
Yeah.
And your last time you ran it, as you were saying there, was Zola Budd. Was she wearing shoes at the time?
Yes. Yeah, this is a South African road. There's broken glass. This is not your pristine, swept European road. This is an African road you wouldn't go barefoot.
Because it is a tough road as well, like, isn't it? There's potholes and things like that.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, I wouldn't want to exaggerate, but I mean...
Yeah. But in the crowd, though, if you're in the back there, you'd need to watch yourself. You
have to watch in the beginning very carefully because it's dark and you can fall over. Down run, next year will be a down run. Leaving Pietermaritzburg, you can trip over. There's traffic islands and things. You got to look down, and especially at the start, because people discard a down run. When it starts in Pietermaritzburg, a normal year, it can be 1 degree. No, it can be 0, freezing. So people bundle up and then they start discarding as they get going. But don't worry, I don't want to make anyone think it's an Arctic adventure. By the time you get to Pinetown on a down run, it's stinking hot and muggy. Yeah.
Hydration must be a difficult thing then, because it is very sort of humid.
No, it isn't, because there's so many tables.
Right.
Your biggest problem is you're going to overhydrate. Because people get so panicky about the hot African sun that they drink at every table. Now you think at every table, and there are about 48 tables throughout and when I say a table, I'm talking 200 meters of tables stretched with volunteers who are handing things. People take something at every single table, but the next thing they're overhydrated.
Or maybe take too much sugar. Did you have anything special that helped you fuel through the race when you were in your winning stages?
Yeah, I used to. I mean, we didn't have those special sports drinks and things then, but the standard drink in my day was Coca-Cola, flat Coke, and water. You know, that was it. Coke was the sponsor of the race. Yeah, that was it in those days. And a cheeseburger the night before. So yeah, from
a nutrition point of view, then there was nothing really. It's not something you really focused on.
No, I did what was called the Sultan diet in those days. I followed Ron Hill, who's one of the great English heroes of marathon running, and Ron Hill, PhD, as a scientist, used what was called the Sultan diet, which is 3 days of depletion followed by 3 days of carbohydrate loading, and on that diet, and he said, obviously he was a brilliant runner, and I've met Ron. Um, it worked for him because he won Boston, the European Champs, Commonwealth Games, and he still blames the day of mourning at the 1972 Olympics. There was a day put aside for mourning the dead Israeli competitors at the 72 Olympics, and it pushed him to one extra day of carbo loading. And I think he said he felt heavy and sluggish in the race and finished fifth.
But you can't argue
might have had a chance.
You can't argue with Ron Hill, like definitely not.
No. Yeah.
He's an amazing man. I met him myself when we'd done the Great North Run, I think it was. Like, he ran every day. I forget, was it 52 years?
He had the longest streak. I think it's still the world record streak. The minimum run, I think, is a mile or something like that. You have to do that, even if you've got a broken ankle. You've got to do it on your crutches or something.
So, just before we finish, then, give me an insight into Parkrun in South Africa, because you.
Now you're talking. Now you're talking. So for me, maybe one of my problems has been that thing that we all have when we start to get an impending sense of mortality. You know, is that like, what would my legacy be? And the Comrades is fantastic, and if I inspired a few people to run, that's wonderful. But a lot of people have said, well, your wins were for yourself, Bruce, and yeah, you did inspire some people. But for many people, there is no chance that they will ever be able to run a 90-kilometer race, yet alone win it. But Parkrun is legacy stuff. And Paul, who started it in the UK, is an old mate. He was actually one of my seconds in the Comrades Marathon one year. He bought me my drinks and stuff like that. He started Parkrun, Paul Sinton-Hewitt, at Bushy Park in London, and 13 people came. And as we all know, it became the phenomenon it is. But he asked me to start it in South Africa. And it has been a complete joy to just watch this thing grow. We had one parkrun, a little bit like Bushy Park. We had one parkrun in Johannesburg in a park called Delta Park. 26 people came. And now, you know, obviously COVID has interrupted things, but we'll be back. I've got absolutely no doubt we'll be back, and we'll be twice as strong. We've got 1.2 million registered members. We've got 230 events. I know the UK's got 1,000, but we're really happy. And where I'm getting particular delight, we're starting to move into the townships and the really rough areas where a park is not pretty. A park's got rubbish and a rusting bicycle and a dead body, but the communities are starting to run. And most importantly in South Africa, I think where we've broken the mold a bit is more than half our people don't run a step. They walk. So our average time is the slowest parkrun time in the parkrun world, and we're so proud of that. We don't want our time to get fast.
Yeah,
we want more and more large people to come along. And like the other day at a parkrun, Mashishing Parkrun in Mpumalanga province, I'd run it, and I'd finished a long time, and a large lady crossed the line, and she punched the air like this. I said, "Why are you so happy?" She said, "Because I broke an hour for the first time." And that's phenomenal. As you know, an hour is not going to make anyone in Nairobi have a sleepless night. But for her, it was hugely meaningful, and that's wonderful. And then we're also, the plan is we've started in Namibia, we're in Eswatini, to go into Zimbabwe, Mozambique. If I could, I would die content if I thought a lot of Africa has started parkrunning because you introduced it, Bruce. That would be, we've got so much corruption and theft and stealing going on in South Africa with our politicians, and I want to say to them, you've got no idea about what wealth is. Wealth is when a stranger comes and hugs you and says, "Thank you for parkrun, you changed my life." That's wealth, beyond your wildest dreams, and so I'm very, running's been very kind to me. It's been wonderful for me. And yeah, parkrun, if I sound emotional, I am. It's fantastic. It's just incredible. And I told Paul it won't work in South Africa because South Africans won't volunteer. They'll want to be paid. And I was proved completely wrong. South Africans do volunteer. And maybe the indication was at Comrades. I should have seen it, where people help you along the way who are total strangers. But
it's phenomenal, and it's a great point you made there about the times being slower, because it just demonstrates how inclusive it is, because you want it to be everybody.
We guarantee you that you can be slow. We will take your time. No one will laugh at you. In fact, you'll get the biggest round of applause probably than the first finisher, because the first finisher, when they finish, is just the volunteers there. You know, when you finish, maybe half the people are all milling around and chatting, and they'll all. So that for me has been the wonderful part about it. Yeah, and then exploring our country. I mean, I have been to most of our park runs, and when I tell you that we've got, you know, a park run like Da'ar, which is in the middle of the desert, with quiver trees and rolling sand dunes, or Swakopmund in Namibia, going right down to the edge of the sea, but it's desert. And then you go from that to an urban park run in Cape Town, which is run in the foothill, you know, below Table Mountain, but through some of the city little sidewalks and things like that, to a park run on the beach, East London, Nahoon Point, just along the beach, in the forests, Umgeni, Umdoni park run.
We actually have one in prison here in Northern Ireland. An actual official park run.
I know, and that's on my to-do list. Because don't worry, we're wanting to do that as well, because our prisons are desperate places that just produce desperate people when they come out.
I actually did a podcast, Cell Block to 5K, and it was a prison where they were using sport then to try and rehabilitate people, because the rehabilitation system wasn't working at all, and it was trying to give people a feeling of worth. And it was an amazing experience to talk to those guys who had actually done it, who actually felt like there was a little bit from hope, and through sport and through running just 5K. And the relationship that it made as well in the prison between the inmates and the security, and even what the security guys got out of it themselves, because they actually went on the same journey.
No, I can't wait to get it going in South Africa. I mean, we'd have to go in very gently at low, I don't know, a prison where people are serving very short sentences, you know, and try it out there where no one's trying to escape or anything like that. And
it's such a powerful tool, Parkrun. It's just it's transforming lives. You know, I was talking to a guy who's lost 18 stone there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
That is a life-changing amount of weight. I've got a great story about a girl that we had on the podcast, Rosie Ryan, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer about 3 years ago. And she was given like 6 or 7 months to live. And when I podcast her, she had done 150 park runs.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
So, like, to her, a park run was another milestone. You know, I was told like 3 years ago. Now she's done 4 of the world major marathons last year.
Oh, wonderful.
And she's going to finish that. And, you know, that park run gives people focus and hope and keeps your spirit high as well.
We've got a huge number of people in South Africa who are Parkrun to Comrades. They started off with a 5K. Then eventually they build up the courage to do a 10. Then they do their first half marathon. And 2 years later, they're on the start line of Comrades.
And you're already telling them when they're doing the 5K. You can see it already. Only a matter of time. Yeah. It's only a matter of time.
The biggest park run, certainly I think in the world, is North Beach, Durban. And the day before Comrades, there's over 2,000 participants in a park run. But most of them are walking or jogging very slowly because they've got a little problem with a 90K race the next morning. But they still when they're in South Africa, they want to tick a South African park run. So they run, yeah. That's
class. Bruce, we're going to wrap it up at that. That was absolutely excellent. I really enjoyed that. That was a really quick hour and a half. That's how engaging you are. So you've a book coming out September 2021.
Yes, it's going to be called Winged Messenger, and it's for novice runners. But I think anybody would probably read it and get some value out of it. You know, certainly if any of my old opposition or any of the old winners brought out a book, I would buy it immediately just to see how did they train, what did they do. It would be fascinating for me. So
you're fooled to think that's for novice runners. Like I'm like, can I get a peep of it now? Just show me.
Yeah, well, it's for novice Comrades runners. You know, to give them an idea how many long runs, because you have to do a couple like in the over 42 Ks, not too many, but you have to do a few. So it's just that kind of thing. But I've got the notes there explaining what I did wrong, and what I did right, and how this worked and that didn't work, and Yeah, the only problem was it's got I too much, so I'm trying to remove that. But it's still I think it will be useful. It's not going to rival J.K. Rowling's numbers sold, but I think it'll sell a few, and over the years it'll probably continue to. So
yeah, we'll share it on the
quite proud
podcast
of it.
as soon as it's published. We'll share it on the podcast.
Yeah,
So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
You have another book out as well, or a book written about you. Is it the Comrades?
Yeah, there's a book written about me, which John Cameron Dow, who died about a year ago, wrote. Yeah, it's a bit of a whitewash. It's a bit embarrassing because it hasn't got any of the bad stuff.
Okay, we'll take that. So that will whet people's appetite whilst they're waiting for your book.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to get this video out straight away because there's no editing.
Okay.
This is a great application, and then I'll release the podcast a week later. So I'll just put the video out as a little teaser for people. But epic, looks really good.
Yeah, great.
Right, thanks, Bruce.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Rory. Okay,
Cheers.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.